Namaste. Gems from Savitri. We'll read a passage from The Secret Knowledge, which we know is a most wonderful canto. And if one has to just read one canto in Savitri, then this is one of the canto where almost all the secrets are revealed. The secret of creation, the secret of our soul, the secret of the divine, the secret of divine presence in life, the secret of the avatar, the threefold status of the divine, Purusha and Prakriti, the whole journey of human life through the entire cycles of births and deaths, the great consummation towards which it moves, the fourfold personality of the soul, and everything actually. It's the ultimate. If one wants to know, and that's why it's titled The Secret Knowledge. So we read a passage from there which is about how the divine revelation takes place in human beings. So very often when we don't have that revelation, we have this idea of gathered, I don't know whether from television or where, that suddenly there will be a huge light like a million suns bursting in the skies. It can happen that way, but when it happens that way, at least I am aware of people who had sometime this, most people lose their mind. So it's not how the divine normally reveals himself. That was a special revelation given to Arjuna as a Divya Drishti. It is not something just given to anybody and everybody. But there are several ways that the divine revelation can take place. Second is that very often people ask that how to know the divine will. Now, it's divine will is not like a human mental will telling us like a set of do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that. More like, and especially imposing itself. Divine will is more like something that takes the totality of things and gives a little nudge, a little direction here. It is felt inside more than a voice which is heard. So we see in this passage some of these beautiful revelations of the divine in us. And this is page 47. The very first thing that Sri Aurobindo reminds us is that this revelation is invariably a grace. One cannot compel the divine to act. This, we read it in scriptures that Dhruv ki tapasya se, he compelled the divine. There's nothing like you cannot compel the divine because by nature he is absolute and acts in total freedom. If he could be compelled, he would not be divine any longer. What looks like a compulsion is an ignorant human way of looking at it. Because of the tapasya, divine was compelled to come. But he is not like, he is the one who even does the tapasya in us. That is a greater revelation. So when he prepares us for the readiness and when we are ready, that moment of revelation can be any moment, the most unexpected of moments. And we have countless stories like that. And that's why Mirabai says, Adhi Raat Prabhu Darshan Denge Prem Nadi Ke Tira. When he will reveal himself, we don't know. It is not like when I am sitting in meditation, suddenly there will be a great vision. Very often these things can be very misleading. And how he can come? Sometimes the inexpressible mystery elects a human vessel of descent. This on page 47. So right in the beginning, Sri Aurobindo is reminding us the inexpressible mystery. Why he chooses? No one knows. There is no answer to it. No human answer. Somebody asked Arjuna himself that why me? In a good sense. Why me? So then he reveals that he says, I am a very ordinary person. I have seen you like a friend. And suddenly I see this grand revelation. He says, you see me as a friend. But I see you otherwise. I see you someone with whom I have been together in the battle of the ages. As Nar Narayana. Arjuna doesn't know. He is born like of course, a special birth, but he doesn't know what is his special relation with Sri Aurobindo. And there are a number of instances in Sri Aurobindo's own life. We have that Charuchandra Datta story where suddenly Sri Aurobindo says, one of those with whom I have fought the battle of the ages. With Dilip Kumar Roy, where he says, whom I have cherished like a son and a friend. Now, Dilip Kumar Roy was full of doubts and even eventually left the ashram. He wrote things, But the thing is that the divine doesn't see that. That is a surface personality. There is something deeper. So he uses the word, sometimes the inexpressible mystery elects a human vessel of descent. A breath comes down from a supernal layer, and once selected, it will make sure that the work is done. Shubindu gives that example of, Kali using Napoleon. Napoleon became very arrogant, but that work had to be done. She will not leave that yantra till once she has chosen. Now, how much the yantra will progress is a different matter. When the task is over, that will be decided then, not before that. So, chooses a human vessel of descent. A breath comes down from a supernal air. A presence is born. A guiding light awakes. A stillness falls upon the instruments. One of the experiences of the divine is that there is a natural stillness. Often people ask that why don't we have pranayam and asanas in this yoga? Very simple, it's not necessary. They are mechanical ways of trying to make the body and the breath and the prana enter into stillness. But just as when the master of master comes, just imagine the king of kings is walking on the, often I give this example in a conference, seminar. Supposing Buddha really came, there was a conference on Buddha. I said, all of you are speaking on Buddha. Imagine if Buddha came. Would we still have the audacity to stand on the dais and speak about Buddha? There will be such an immobility. So, one of the things that we begin to experience is a spontaneous stillness of the instruments. So, this is the sign of the divine presence. Fixed, motionless like a marble monument, stone calm, the body is a pedestal, supporting a figure of eternal peace. It's the descent of peace. Peace is the sign of the divine presence. And Ananda is the sign of the Divine Mother's dynamic Shakti working within us. So this is one of them. There are a number of such, revelations which can take place. One of them is this. Or a revealing force sweeps blazing in out of some vast superior continent. Suddenly one is driven by the breath of God. And things which deemed impossible are done so effortlessly. One can't imagine. Imagine in the whole battlefield of Kurukshetra, how Arjuna, he is a great warrior, but still, people who are opposite are not some, ordinary people. But how a great work is done through him. So, this is the second example. Or a revealing force sweeps blazing in out of some vast superior continent. Knowledge breaks through, trailing its radiant seas, and nature trembles with the power, the flame. It's very difficult for the human instrument to contain that descent of the divine force. And yet it can come as cascades of knowledge pouring in. The Vedic rishis would call it as the rivers which are pouring into the human vessel. And they would speak of the sevenfold inspiration, the ninefold inspiration, all the great goddesses, inspiration, revelation, intuition. Now, if the brain is not ready, I have seen at least one person who woke up to these revelations but again had a breakdown. And at one point, Sri Aurobindo says, what is a genius? Genius is nature's effort to exceed herself. And in the process, sometimes the instrument breaks down because it's not ready. And yet it will use. It's not easy, to catch hold. We have the classic example which I have used in Greek mythology. Sri Aurobindo has also mentioned her, Cassandra. Cassandra is the character in Trojan War. So Cassandra has the power of vision because she has, in the story, mated with Apollo. But Apollo is the god of, higher reason, not the normal, ordinary reason. But she could not contain it. So she says, no. That's how the story goes. That after they come together, she says, now I don't want you. So she is cursed. Cursed in this way that she will see correctly but nobody will believe her. So there is this power which can come. We have another example is Sampati. Sampati can see, but Sampati's wings are burnt. So he cannot execute, he cannot fly. So that's why a great preparation is required for just the brain to contain that force. When that revelation pours, see, normally how does our brain normally operate? So if we have to, let us say, read something, we go through a body of words, they carry a meaning, grammar, all this is already this fixed format. Now when there is no fixed format and knowledge is descending, automatically the brain has to receive, change them into words, sound, symbols and express to the mouth. There is no time, you have not remembered anything. And yet it will be like, Shubindu's long sentences is a classic example. How they are flowing, flowing, and if somebody doesn't know where it is going to lead, people are lost. Life Divine's very first sentence, the earliest preoccupation of man, or so it seems, is inevitable in his awakened thoughts. And then he goes on to say, the earliest formulas of wisdom promise to be the last. God, like freedom, immortality. This is a long passage which ends up. Some of the passages run into how many? 20 lines. How is he writing? Now it is coming. Now human structures are not geared to receive that knowledge. It's a total truth. Normally we see truth very linearly. It is either this or that or that or that. But divine truth doesn't work like that. Divine truth touches every point together. It's a global vision. So when you describe it, it's very difficult. That's why Mother says there is no speech right now which can describe the supramental vision. Because it's a totality you see. Totality in terms of time, past, present, future. Totality in terms of space. All the forces at play at a given point of time. So, or a revealing knowledge breaks through. So it's very powerful expression. Trailing its radiant seas, and nature trembles with the power, the flame. Nature is all this mind, body, brain, heart. A greater personality sometimes, then there is this third revelation, third approach. A greater personality sometimes possesses us, which yet we know is ours. And or we adore the master of our souls. So during that time in Indian tradition, with regard to talk, I can say there is a tradition of Vyaspeeth. I think some of us may be knowing. You know what is a Vyaspeeth? So Vyaspeeth is when people have to speak. Not anybody will go, but according to the tradition, those who have to speak, they sit on that pedestal. Now, when they sit on that pedestal, it's not you who is speaking. It is some other consciousness which is speaking through you. And some of these examples, experiences you can have, like Delhi Ashram. Delhi Ashram, there is a place where people sit and speak. It's the same experience we have in beach office, at least I have had. There are some places where the moment you sit, there is something else which takes over. Of course, once you are tuned to that, it is invariably the master of our souls who comes and takes charge. And Shubindu describes it during the early stages of his yoga. He says, I want to speak one thing. He describes it in aphorism. But he takes hold of my brain and speech and speaks something else. What can I do? Shall I not do the bidding of my master? That's how it happens. Uttarpada speech. He is called by the Dharma Rakshini, Hindu Dharma Rakshini Sabha. Very few people may be knowing that is the origin of Uttarpada speech. So, Hindu Dharma Rakshini Sabha. So, he goes there, he used to speak. Then he says, actually, I didn't know what I am going to speak, but I had something going on that I'll speak now. But now he's making me speak. So I have to speak what he wants me to speak. And then he speaks of something very different. Toward the end, there is a little passage about Hindu. If you don't read that passage, you don't even know. He says, this is the truth for which India is rising. And if we want to stay by truth, then there is a meaning in this Hindu Dharma Rakshini Sabha. Otherwise, it will pass away like any other OTOs thing. I mean, if you read that last bit, it will be very surprising that, okay, for this, Aurobindo is speaking. It looks like a speech on Sanatan Dharma, but its topic was not Sanatan Dharma. Its topic was to speak on Hindu Dharma and protecting the Hindu religion. So he says, you have named your society Protection for Hindu Religion, but what is the Hindu religion? So the takeoff is what really is Hindu religion, and he goes on to very different. So the master of our souls. Then the small bodily ego thins and fails, no more insisting on its separate self. So then automatically you discover that tomar karmo tumi karo ma loki boli koriyami, because you realize that it's not you. It's impossible for you to do that. Losing the punctilio of its separate birth, it leaves us one with nature and with God. So I'll give you one more example. It's a very interesting example now. Our Reverend Monada is no more here. I mean, he is with Mother. So, in All India Magazine, we started taking from Monada's books, Supreme and some of these books. So, initially, people had hesitation. Said, but how do you know that, it is a true conversation? I said, what is your doubt? He said, because it's a conversation, we know him, he could not have remembered all this. I said, yes, he could not have remembered, but the mother can make you remember. Because I have that experience. So I said, no, she can make you do things which are the most seemingly impossible things. So also I have my reasons to believe there are passages which you can find almost ditto passage in the agenda. It is like when she has spoken, something else in him has received. And it is because it's a memory notation. He was not writing when mother has spoken. They are subsequently his diary notes, and some places mother has said okay, but some places it is. But one can see that this is very clearly carrying the stamp of the mother. Again, I'll give you another example. There is a passage which was circulating on WhatsApp recently. And somebody asked me that, Alugda, is it written by the mother? It goes in the name of mother. Remember me. I don't know whether you have seen or not. Remember my child, like that. And it's a very powerful passage. I also had it once. So actually it is not said by the mother. But the person who wrote it felt that he's in contact with the mother. That's how he wrote. And I would say that it carries its own stamp of authenticity. It comes like that. It's like a cascade. You really can't see the distinction. It's like the Divine Mother is speaking through somebody. And the mother has spoken about it. Says, what does it matter, this body, that body, how she has used people's Sri Aurobindo entire speech of Churchill. And he would hear back on the radio and say, okay, here there was a little mistake in the reception of the, what he was pouring inside him. And all kinds of possibilities are there. So how to enter into that state? So Sri Aurobindo gives us a very beautiful 3-line technique of meditation, shall we say. This carries the essence of meditation. Meditation is not a technique. It's not a method. It's not a process. It's a state. And that state can seize upon us anywhere. It can seize us in the market. It can seize us, of course, when we sit. It can seize us suddenly when we are caught up in a deep anguish. And what is that state? It is a state when we are completely turned towards that divine mystery and seek Him, have thirst for Him. All else is banished at that point of time. Meditation is not sitting and concentrating here at the same time, Nowadays that advertisement comes, that your cell phone and phone pay kiya ki nahi kiya. Because your mind is wandering everywhere. But what is meditation? In moments when the inner lamps are lit. They are lit. He lights. And the life's cherished guests are left outside. Our spirit sits alone and speaks to its gulfs. Every day we should sit down for some time and try to speak to our own highest self and deepest self, if you want to put it in a more secular way. मैं वो मूवी क्या गाना था, मैं और मेरी तन्हाई. Your real self every day, and then you enter into a state where there is a state of wideness. A wider consciousness opens then its doors, invading from spiritual silences. A ray of the timeless glory stoops a while to commune with our seized, illumined clay. Our body seized, and leaves its huge white stamp upon our lives. There have been things like that, conversations. Of course, we are very fortunate. We have none of those conversations can ever replace the direct contact with the divine and His conversation. But still, we can receive the divine's answer when we are in that state of inner communion. The state of inner communion when we communicate our anguish. So the way is that supposing one is going through a period of crisis, distress, you want to know the answer. Outer way is pick up one of Sri Aurobindo's books, open it, or Mother's book, see, think, reflect, meditate. The other way is express all this anguish to her and sit quiet. Give time for the divine to speak. He speaks in every language and no language. If nothing else, He will fill us with peace. In that peace, we will see a little light. We don't have to worry what language. Just pour that anguish and wait in quietude, not restlessness. And then a time comes when suddenly we feel a kind of inner illumination, a kind of, what our deepest dharma would tell us, and all the layers in between. We can see that. And then we move along those lines. So, this is the passage which reveals to us about some of the ways through which the divine can come in contact with us. And Sri Aurobindo says that these are the signals of eternity. Before we have the full disclosure and union with the divine, we have these little touches which come and go. Seized illumined clay. When our body is seized by the divine presence and leaves its stamp upon our lives. Even after the presence withdraw, it can't be all the time. That's what Sri Aurobindo says even about the Gita, incidentally. And it's there in the Gita itself. Shri Krishna himself says later on. The Gita was written in a supernormal state of consciousness, was a superconscient state in which Krishna reveals that truth, because it's a moment of crisis and he gives a grand self-revelation. But after the war is over, you can't contain that state all the time. He is God, He is an avatar, but you can't be in that state all the time. And that was the significance even of the darshan days. When Sri Aurobindo was asked, why don't you give darshan more often? Sri Aurobindo's answer is very revealing. He said, if I give darshan double the number of times than I do now, its effect will be reduced to half. If you see their darshan photographs and how to contain that superconscience in the human body, people don't realize it can break the clay. It's not easy. You see Sri Aurobindo when he drew it and how the physical body, it's not possible. Swami Vivekananda spoke about it, that my soul is becoming wider as the universe and I leave my body in few years. Very often people ask, people who have this kind of experiences, they start feeling, it's not that they want to die, but they know that it's not easy to contain. And they have an urge, something in them urges them to just, withdraw into that, because this is such a strong, that mystery. How can you after that just deal with normal life? Unless it is for work. If it is not for work, the natural tendency is to get absorbed into that. So much captivating. And one can understand why people went into samadhi and didn't want to come back. But as the mother says, here there is a work to do and a mystery in the play. Namaste.